Cheers, folks, and welcome back to Modern Hatchet. Despite being released unrated into a small handful of theaters, Hatchet 2's opening weekend in 2010 pulled in almost 6 times the cold hard cashola as the originals, which is even more impressive considering that AMC started pulling the movie from theaters within hours, citing poor performance, in some cases after even only 1 or 2 showings. Now, scuttlebutt had it that this was actually done in retaliation for Adam Green's very public spat with the MPAA about overly harsh ratings of independent horror films. But even after the controversy and the movie getting lackluster reviews, it did well enough that Hatchet 3 was okayed and started shooting in mid-2012. Once again, pretty much everyone from the last 2 movies came back for the Bayou Butcher's third outing, with the notable exception of the man himself, Adam Green. While still writing and directing, he tapped original cameraman B.J. McDonald to take up directing duties. Now, the tinfoil hat crowd might be thinking that his stepping down had something to do with appeasing the MPAA, but it was probably just due to Green's schedule and not wanting to half-ass the movie. See, he was writing Hatchet 2 while directing Frozen, and then while directing Hatchet 2, he had to take a break in the middle of production to go on a promotional tour for Frozen. And I think the distractions just manifested in a general feeling that most of the flick wasn't Green's A-game. So considering that he was prepping the first season of Holliston this time around, I think he just decided that he'd rather focus on one project at a time and let a trusted Hatchet alumnus take the helm for what was intended to be the final Hatchet movie. So, keeping with the style, this entry picks up just seconds after Marybeth finishes unloading the shotgun onto Crowley. Who would have thought he had so much blood in him? Although this time around, Danielle Harris reprises her role as Marybeth, and I'm almost disappointed that they didn't make the actress switch a running gag. Like, this time around we could have gotten Allison Scagliotti. They kind of look alike. Or maybe Danielle Ackles. Her maiden name was Danielle Harris. So really, it's only like 2 letters off. Sort of have it be like the opposite version of how Perry Shen keeps reappearing as different characters. She kicks the hatchet out of Victor's reach, just in case, but only makes it a few steps before having to take a moment to process. And I've actually always found it very interesting that Hatchet characters often have these really in-the-moment gut reactions. Even when it seems like a really bad idea if she thinks he might get up. And yeah, okay, there he goes. She starts working her way out of the swamp and manages to reach Vernon and John's bodies before some noises put her on guard. She grabs one of their guns, but noting how effective that was, she puts it down and tries starting up the big-ass chainsaw. Seriously, where does Crowley get this stuff? Is big-ass fans diversifying? Crowley grabs her right as she gets it going, but he's at a bit of a disadvantage since his face seems to be more innards than outards at the moment. That ain't right. He happens to fall right onto the chainsaw, and it saws him completely in half. Bifurcation apparently being far more damage than the curse allows him to shrug off, Crowley is down for the count, and Marybeth grabs the gun and scalps Crowley, and then begins the long walk back to New Orleans to the dulcet tones of Guam. As Hail Genocide fades out, we enter the police station just in time to see Adam Green's cameo being hauled off in irons. At least he's better off than Ben and Mark. Okay, that's awkward. Let's get out of here and follow this guy. Deputy Winslow goes in to talk to Sheriff Fowler, played by Gremlins and Waxwork veteran Zach Gilligan, as they chat about the plague of drunks that descend upon their fair town in mid-February. Marybeth's arrival is announced by someone shouting, "He's got a gun!" from the other room. Leaping into action, Sheriff Fowler runs out of his office and gets into Marybeth's face with the comic intensity of someone who's only ever seen movie cops. They haul her to the showers where Deputy Albert hoses the blood off her, and you guys don't want to save any of that for evidence? DNA, drug tests, nothing? Also, Albert is a double whammy of horror references. Actress Diane Ayala Goldner has been in many modern classics like Feast and The Collector, and the character is named after Sarah Albert, who's been a producer on all the Hatchet movies and Holliston. With Marybeth cleaned up, they give her some sweats and put her in a cell. The sheriff comes back, hoping that she'll be a bit more lucid.
How many bodies you say there were?
20.
And for anyone keeping score at home, Crowley's body count is 21 kills between the two movies. She continues to assert that Crowley is the killer and is dead. But the sheriff doesn't believe it and recaps the last two movies in the most ridiculous way possible to show how absolutely ludicrous it is that Marybeth went into the death swamp after her family twice.
That has to be the stupidest story and some of the most idiotic and contrived decision-making I've ever heard.
In a nicely meta moment, Adam's cameo gets offended at the insult. The sheriff tries to get, I think, the station press secretary to fend off any reporters while he's out of the swamp, but the early bird gets the scoop, and one's already showing up in person. And she also happens to be his ex-wife, so how's that for narrative efficiency? She's played by Carolyn Williams, who has a long history with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre series and several other horror sequels. Amanda has derailed her career by publishing a lengthy series of articles claiming that Victor Crowley is real, and has become obsessed with his legend.
Because I'm about to post her bail.
Lady, they think she's killed like 24 people. That check is gonna bounce. Out at the swamp, there are a few paramedics who have come by to help the police collect the carnage, and this conspicuously hidden background extra finally reveals himself as Perry Shen, somehow working his way back into the franchise as a third character. Andrew Young, the paramedic. Veteran horror actor Sean Whalen plays Randy, another medic, and Trent's role is reprised by a cast of R.A. Mihailov's Head. Marybeth wakes up back at her jail cell and after some quick introductions isn't particularly endeared by Amanda's self-centered lamentations.
No offense, but fuck you.
So after a brief attempt at mutual respect gets rebuffed, Amanda escalates directly to threatening her with the death penalty due to her family's less than stellar reputation. Man, going straight to the nuclear option. I hope it pays off. There's really nowhere else to go from there. Checking back in with the friends at the swamp, Andrew has finally made it far enough in to find Crowley's body, completely sawn in half, and his description is accurate, but I have some questions. So Crowley is a ghost, right? A ghost, ghoul, some sort of cursed spirit, so why does he leave a body around all day? I don't know, I guess I was just expecting him to sort of dissipate at the end of each night, not just hang around the swamp. But if he doesn't vanish, what does he do all day before his cue to pop out at some point after it gets dark and start murdering? Does he hibernate or freeze like a gargoyle or something? Like, could you find him in the middle of the day and just encase him in concrete, problem solved? Or is he literally pacing around the swamp 24/7, 365 looking for victims? Like, that's almost tragically boring. In continuing with the movie's self-deprecating jabs of the previous films, they poke fun that one actor has played every Asian in the entire series.
It's hilarious. It's hilarious.
Although then again, maybe they are related. Amanda and Marybeth are arguing over the finer points of the repeater ghost rules and can't really be bothered right now, so the sun is set in the swamp, indicating that a decent amount of time has passed, but the sheriff hasn't arrived yet. I guess he's probably off grabbing a burrito. Moe's! Whatever you're craving, it's actually a burrito. Although while he's in transit, the personnel on the scene are going to find enough evidence to support Marybeth's story. Unfortunately, they're going to find that evidence because Victor Crowley is going to reanimate and vigorously introduce them to it. Proving that being hewn in twain has done nothing to hamper his ability to slink in cat-like silence, a reconstituted Crowley crawls out of the body bag and behind Randy, surprising him and using the paddles to pop his brain like an over-nuked hot dog, stuffed with lasagna. Crowley rearms himself with a signature hatchet just as Deputy Hamilton arrives, and he does manage to get off a quick cry for help before Crowley continues conveying cranial trauma and splits his gourd open. When that comes over the radio, Marybeth is finally convinced that she didn't manage to put a stop to the ghost, and Amanda reveals that guns aren't the answer.
I killed him.
You didn't, but I know how.
He just needs a father figure in his life.
I can explain all of it, but first I need to know that you're gonna help me.
She may have had some better buy-in for her plan to go back to the swamp if she had actually led with the idea instead of being vague, but that's gonna be sort of a theme for her character. As she starts working on bumming a ride from the deputy, we get a quick montage of Crowley laying waste to the cops and medics at the scene, which I think brings his total body count up to 6 on-camera kills. Giving the sheriff some credit, he probably took so long getting to the swamp because he had to marshal these troops, since Crowley's killed everyone who was already here. Except Andrew. Like, he can't die because we all know that Perry Shen is the Hatchet series' real final girl. Just before the sheriff can head out, the SWAT team arrives, led by stuntman and actor Derek Mears, most known for being Remake Jason. Also present on the team is Riley Vanderbilt, who's been involved in several Adam Green projects, including playing child Victor Crowley in flashbacks, and she was also married to Green at the time. Sheriff Fowler takes a back seat now that the SWAT leader's big dick is in town, swinging around, randomly shoving subordinates. As Deputy Schneiderman and Doherty bond over the arsenal he's toting around, he starts to fill her in on Victor Crowley's legend.
A long time ago, there was this little boy who was born deformed, and he...
But gets cut off before another flashback can break out.
There was this little boy who was born deformed, and he...
Stop that! You're not going into a song while I'm here.
With Marybeth, Winslow, and Amanda finally on the road, we can get some details about our new plan to take out Crowley this time. Or at least we could if Amanda wasn't being deliberately obtuse.
What is in Ozona?
Thomas Crowley.
If he were alive,
He's dead.
so what are we gonna do? Dig him up?
Not exactly.
Like, for fuck's sake, just out with it. They're already in the car, driving to some random town nowhere near the swamp. But clarifying the plan now is gonna make them turn around and go catch Monday Night Football instead? Okay, you know what? Since I don't want to have to keep coming back to these collections of short, repetitive scenes where the once take-charge Marybeth, who survived Victor Crowley twice, has been nerfed down to sitting in the backseat of a cop car and swearing, let's get this entire subplot out of the way right now. Amanda is taking them to go see Abbott McMullen. Winslow thinks it's a waste of time since McMullen's just a crazy old man, and he thinks that they should be helping his coworkers bleed on things back to the swamp. Amanda interrupts a bickering match to explain that McMullen is a relative of Thomas Crowley and has Thomas's ashes. Victor Crowley can only be put to rest if he's reunited with his father, and Amanda needed Marybeth to do it because apparently it has to be done by a relative of one of the kids responsible for the fire. Emerging from the shadows is Sid Haig in a cameo as Old Man McMullen. He makes the most out of his short scene by hamming it up beyond all sense. He is a deaf, racist, senile, insane old man, and this entire set is his own personal old country buffet. After gnawing his way through every bit of scenery available, Amanda and the deputy leave with Thomas Crowley's ashes in tow. Marybeth finally objects to having to give Crowley the ashes now that they're actually in the car with her, and Amanda has to repeat why she needs Marybeth to do it. Which she does again, once more, when they get to the boats.
And then we make sure she puts that monster back in his grave where he belongs.
We'll be back to this scene later because this is where the subplots finally start to converge. But for now, we can focus on the plot in the woods where they're taking on the now traditional walking slowly through the swamp for character development scene. Hawes finally asks the sheriff for information on the area and the suspect, who for some reason is still Marybeth, despite the fact that she was in custody during the massacre. At the other end of the group, Schneiderman and Doherty do better in their getting to know each other chat, but it doesn't last very long since they happen upon a clearing with bodies tied up, and Hatchet 2, take note, this is how you get a laugh out of degloved testicles.
Balls are not supposed to be hanging from trees, yet I'm finding myself looking at fucking balls, sir.
This
That
guy knows what's
up.
Hawes tries to shut him up, but Schneiderman won't back down in his campaign to convince the sheriff to officially declare Code Crowley. Hawes, are you a cat just swatting at anything dangly? Don't touch those. As the sheriff tries to get his troops back to evacuate the swamp and call in the National Guard, Andrew jump scares his way into the scene. See, even if Perry Shen was capable of being killed in a Hatchet movie, he is far too powerful after 3 films to be killed off-screen. Hawes scoffs at his story, apparently not being amused that a paramedic with no combat or weapons training opted for run and hide over, yes, hang my balls from the tree as a plan.
I hid. And that's the only reason those aren't my balls hanging from that tree!
The sheriff seems to think that Andrew is far more credible of an eyewitness than Hawes does and tries calling in the National Guard for this. but Hawes doesn't buy the legend and wants either the glory or just doesn't believe the scope of the murder spree. Schneiderman really doesn't want his family jewels to be mounted at or above eye level and packs up and walks out. Or at least he tries to, but Hawes body checks him in the tree. I guess Hawes really wants to make the most of his last night here drunk on power, before being fired from law enforcement so hard that he'll be lucky to get a job working as an assistant to Paul Blart Mall Cop. Since everyone's pretty on edge, cue dramatic gunfire sequence. And with that out of the way, I do kind of wonder if that was the same animal from the woodland creature scare in Hatchet 1. The critter was apparently Crowley's advanced guard, so having assessed the numbers and capabilities of the enemy, Crowley doesn't do plans and just jumps out and starts liberally applying murderness to the assembled officers. First up, nameless deputy.
Get over here!
Now going for the double kill, he ropes in Albert.
Double kill!
Despite the troop unloading more ammo into the shed, Crowley manages to grab Albert. Out of courtesy, Hawes gives him a few minutes to finish off both deputies and then orders more fire to be pumped into the offending structure. They try to flank the entrance, but I think by this point we've established that Crowley's past location is not an indicator of his current or future locations, and he appears behind the deputies. Switching tactics, they decide that since shooting him has been pretty ineffective so far, maybe they're just using the guns wrong. So they dogpile around him, but that is not going to get between Victor J. Crowley and murder. So he blows them all away like a superhero shaking off a mob of flunkies and finishes off the deputy with an overhead bifurcation. Remember 2 movies ago when Crowley got shot once and fell over? He's a frickin' zombie ghost tank now. Anyway, Hawes seems to think that he's in a badass action movie, and it's time for the final boss fight. Knockdown, drag-out brawl between classic Jason Voorhees and remake Jason Voorhees.
Let's do this, you little bitch.
But he's not, this isn't, and the remake wasn't very good. So Crowley rips out his spine through his stomach in a tribute to Derek Mears' other big role as the Predator in Predators. Schneiderman decides to stop fucking around and finally make use of that bazooka he's been toting all night. Providing a distraction for his lengthy locking and loading sequence is this lone deputy who manages to drop Crowley with a single gunshot. Probably just from the surprise more than anything. Schneiderman finishes assembling the bazooka while Crowley beats the shit out of this guy, but when he finally gets off the shot, Crowley just sort of sidesteps the missile and holds up the random deputy who gets to ride it into the shed in a combination of slapstick and epic hero explosion moment. Schneiderman is next up on the chopping swamp, though Doherty tries to intervene and gets brushed aside, pulled from the fray by Andrew while Crowley now focuses on Schneiderman. And I guess being close personal friends with the writer doesn't save your son's character from a really nasty on-screen death. I love this story. Dee Snider is basically why Hatchet exists. Adam Green has had this just inexplicably convenient series of run-ins with Dee Snider at various formative moments of his career. Every time he felt distraught and needed motivation, Dee just happened to be across the street for some reason to give him a pep talk. Little did Adam know that every time he bumped into Dee, he was also in dark times, broke and trying to revive his career after Twisted Sister. So every pep talk that Adam got was also Dee giving himself a pep talk. Because of this, the two became very good friends. Dee plays Adam's 80s obsessed boss in Holliston, and his son Cody has been in 2 Hatchet movies as both the young Samson in Flashback, and now, drowning in the mud with no arms, Deputy Schneiderman. Holy fucking shit! Ben is still alive!
You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Victor, you don't get to count him twice, and I guess that means we need to drop Hatchet 1's murder count down to 7, which is barely like the silver medal of evisceration. After finally dispatching our original protagonist, for reals this time, Crowley tries to get back on track by facing down this random medic, but there's a kill-stealing asshole of an alligator that further ruins his kill streak.
Dick.
They finally make it back to the boats, but can't start the engines because of the charming casual racism of the South.
I work with a bunch of redneck racists. They don't let me drive anything.
Although you'd think this would have come up way earlier and they would have just gone to the sheriff's boat first. They try to make it now, but of course, Crowley is in the way, so they barricade themselves in the ambulance boat and radio the National Guard. Cleverly referring to Crowley as a crazed gunman so that the sheriff doesn't sound completely off his rocker. Now, with their support inbound, they just have to buckle in and wait out the unstoppable murder storm that is Victor Crowley. Although suddenly it becomes too quiet.
What?
At least until Crowley comes back with the old reliable, the gas-powered belt sander, and starts grinding his way through the wall. Although, since he hasn't changed the belt ever, it's gotta be so worn down by now, it's like 6,000 grit. So all he's gonna do is give the fucking boat a mirror shine. They briefly discuss making a break for the sheriff's boat while Crowley is distracted trying to sand through the wall, and I kind of love the meta nod that Victor seems to be everywhere at once. Being a paramedic, Andrew tries to figure out how to fight back with the power of pharmacology, and as much as I would love to see Crowley tripping balls, they lose power to the cabin and switch to slightly more traditional weapons. He tries to grab Andrew through the hole, but Doherty beats him with a hammer until he lets go. Also contributing to the distraction is Amanda's group finally arriving within earshot. I feel like Amanda is violating some sort of international convention regarding the treatment of prisoners, ordering Marybeth to carry this urn around. Winslow tries to be reassuring, but Marybeth is pretty sick of being a chain gang of one. Amanda manages to get Victor's attention and draws him away from the boat. With the grinding quiet for a moment, the survivors in the boat manage to hear the shouting, and Sheriff Fowler recognizes the voice as Amanda's and sticks his head out the hole to try to warn her away. But Crowley isn't one to pass up an opportunity like that and rips his head off. Doherty tries to get the sheriff's gun now that he's not really using it anymore, but Victor's basically hovering outside the hole now to play whack-a-mole with law enforcement officers and takes Doherty while Andrew shakes and pisses in the corner. Crowley finally appears in front of Amanda's group, so she hides behind Winslow and pushes Marybeth forward to give him the urn. Surprisingly, he seems to recognize his father despite his new powdery form and is moving a little bit less murderously than usual. Yeah, but then he decides that rending others into pieces is far more fun than resting in peace, cracks his knuckles and lunges. Proving that his reaction to bullets is fully drama-based, he stops for a second before Winslow finishes emptying the clip. And then another one. Tristuple tapped.
He's dead.
Winslow declares a job well done and then exits the movie as his work is done here. Amanda dramatically dives after the urn and tosses it back at Marybeth, but like Icarus flying too close to the sun, she gonna die. Marybeth grabs the urn and stands up, but Crowley throws Amanda's head at her, knocking her over. And I don't know why, the moment is just funny to me, like it almost deserves a cartoon sound. Victor sets her aside for later, but she manages to dump out the urn on his head before he can finish her off. Finally reuniting with a strange family can be gooey business, and Crowley staggers and falls, then starts melting. Marybeth manages to get herself off the tree and find Schneiderman's grenade launcher. She's prepared to blow away the newly skeletal slasher when he gets back up to continue the rampage. But after teasing it out, he doesn't move, so she just declares fuck it and explodes him into chunky salsa. Thus ending the reign of possibly our era's own most successful slasher in glorious fashion, at least until they resurrect him. Air support finally arrives and Andrew peeks his head out of the cabin to wave down rescue while Marybeth gasps her last. Or is it? This was intended to be the end of Hatchet as a series, and for several years, it was. We'll get into the reasons they made a fourth film in another video, but for now, I think this was a great way for Hatchet to go out. The last time I saw an entire SWAT team show up to take down a slasher was in The Final Friday, and that movie was a dumpster fire. But it feels completely natural here, both in the sense of escalation from the previous movies, and how they set it up in this movie. I also really enjoyed the up and down pacing provided by having officers arrive for the slaughter in waves. It let them sort of spread out the action over more of the movie and have a somewhat more interesting structure. Now, I do have some issues with the movie, but they are mostly minor. Aside from pure sequelitis, there's no explanation for Crowley's absurdly escalated toughness, though some theories have him just going a bit googly-eyed when Marybeth is around and he's just stone cold otherwise. And Victor leaving a corpse around all day confuses some of the ghost rules that the other movies seem to be operating on. My biggest gripe was Marybeth's subplot with Amanda and Deputy Winslow because of how aggressively Amanda dodged every question about her plans and kept repeating the same non-answers. I'm sure it was intentionally written that way, but I was just having so much fun in the swamp that I couldn't wait for her to stop dancing around the issue. It was also a bit disappointing to have Marybeth nerfed so hard since she'd been leading the charge pretty well for the last 2 movies. Yeah, I mean, I guess it wouldn't make a lot of sense for her to go and try to collect her folks again, and she did think that she'd had her revenge, at least in the beginning, but replacing her personal driving quest to kill Crowley with Amanda's self-centered motivation to save her career just felt like a bit of a downgrade. Also, Sid Haig's scene was very awkward. This is the first Hatchet movie that doesn't lean on gratuitous nudity and cheap sex jokes, so to suddenly introduce the cranky deaf racist with dementia felt out of place and done just because Sid Haig is so well known for the Rob Zombie movies. Also, in retrospect, Marybeth's final confrontation with Victor Crowley felt a little bit anticlimactic, although that's probably just because of how intense the last movies was and how little involvement she actually had in the story this time around. But overall, I think this entry is very well balanced between humor and violence, sometimes even mixing the two pretty well without completely going for slapstick. The series feels like it's gone from just being a slasher homage to really standing on its own while still not taking itself too seriously. I love the character arc of Adam Green's cameos, and Joel David Moore's reappearance was hilarious. Despite not wanting the series to continue past this, I think Green and company did a very good job of getting Hatchet over the sophomore slump, and I think this is definitely a high point for the series and possibly even modern slashers. As a bit of a change of pace, next up we'll be taking a look at the little found footage franchise that could, Bad Ben, before finishing the Hatchet series with Victor Crowley. In the meantime, I do hope that you've enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like it and feel free to leave any questions or comments below. Also, if you'd like to know more about future videos, please subscribe and enable notifications. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Y'all know what's up.